There's things all over Facebook. People say things, and sometimes it arouses interest, or you have something to say about it. So I thought I'd start doing a series where we just go over your questions and answer them. On the Facebook group, the corn page, corn snake page, this girl said,
"Hello everyone. I'm a vet tech student and want to specialize in herpetology eventually. I got into a discussion with my teacher regarding the feeding practices of snakes. I'm having a difficult time finding scholarly articles in the databases I have access to. If anyone can comment with scholarly articles about where to feed my snake and why, I would love to read them."
so think about this. Why would there be a scholarly article about where to feed your snake? It's just, there's no reason to kind of like study something like that. Just thoughts. Just thoughts popping off my head. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you should study this.
But the question I'm trying to understand is if a snake should be fed outside of its enclosure. I know there are pros and cons to both sides of the argument, but I'm having a hard time finding a specialist recommendation. I guess where I'm struggling is if snakes would actually develop a food type of aggression if they're fed in their enclosures rather than outside of it.
If we feed a snake in its enclosure, is that going to cause it to develop aggression towards us?
Again, I would love to read scholarly articles.
We're not going to find any scholarly articles, okay? You're going to get everyone's opinion. And that's why I thought it would be fun to share mine.
Or peer-reviewed or posted by a specialist in the field. I've reached out to Dog Matter, but do not expect an response. Pick for attention so my post doesn't get lost.
Okay? So here's what's going to happen. If all you do is open up your enclosure to feed your snake, then every time that you open that enclosure, the snake is going to think it's going to get fed. So when you grow snakes, let's say in bins, and you put like a group of 20 snakes in these little bins, and you're not holding them and you're not spending time with them, and they're just used to that drawer opening for them to be cleaned, that drawer opening to be fed. It all depends how it's done. Some people just move the snake and clean it like that and not take a little bit of time. Sometimes just taking that little bit of time and holding that snake a little bit, like when you're cleaning it, okay, I'm gonna hold it for a few minutes, then I'm going to put it to the side, then I'm going to clean its home, then I'm going to hold it a bit, and then I'm going to put it away. Just by adding that step to your kind of routine, you're going to turn off that snake's kind of thought that every time it's interacting with you, being handled or worked with, that you are going to be feeding it. But if you don't do that, which lots of people toss the snake aside, clean it, toss it back in, so the only interaction they're really getting is feeding, then lots of the time what they're going to be thinking is when you open the cage, you're going to be fed. Now, it's going to be that way whether you feed the snake in its home or if you feed it somewhere else. If a snake doesn't have another snake with it, so if a snake's on its own, there is no reason to take that snake out of its home and feed it somewhere else. There's absolutely no reason at all. There's no way that it benefits it. Unless you're doing it to kind of clean its home. What I tend to do is clean the snake's home the day before I feed it. So the day before feeding day, I'll clean all the snake's homes. That way I know the home is clean and I can feed the snake. Once I feed it, it's not a big mess, right? Whereas if you don't clean the snake's home and then you just feed them and then the next day their home needs to be cleaned, you should have just done it before. So cleaning the homes just before feeding them is what you do, and then you feed them inside their home. You feed them in their nice clean home and it's good. The biggest thing that turns off that reaction or aggression, if you call it, it's not aggression, okay? It's reaction. If it's living alone and it never has any movement, anything that moves, anything it sees is kind of going to trigger it. Can I eat that, or what is that? And in the wild, they have that in them. They have this nature that is kind of to protect them. It does two things. What is that? They're cautious. You know, in the Bible it says cautious like serpents, because snakes are cautious. So they're naturally super cautious of everything because they start off as these tiny little worms that everything's going to eat. So they have to be careful. So if you spend a lot of time with them and they get used to you, then they change from cautious to curious. If you don't spend that time, then they still have that cautiousness, they still have that kind of defensiveness, like, oh no, and then they're excited to eat. Now, if you have them around other snakes, so if you grow your snakes together, that's going to turn off that kind of feeding response, that automatic feeding response to everything that moves. It's going to turn off that cautiousness too, because when they're in a home with a whole pile of other babies, there's all that movement around them all the time. So it's gonna desensitize their sensitivity to movement, and it's also gonna desensitize their appetite to everything that moves. So a snake, for instance, like this, that was probably always on its own, was not handled much. This snake is Spirit. And I saw her just being sold over and over again, and no one could keep her because she's crazy. Like, she has the defensiveness. She doesn't have crazy food aggression, but she has that crazy defensiveness. She's scared of everything because she wasn't exposed to all that movement. If she was raised with a pile of other snakes, she wouldn't have that sensitivity. And you can see how see that? Like, I can hold her fine and she'll never bite me, but she's triggered by movement. She's scared, she's cautious, she has that nature in her. If she was raised with other snakes the way I raised mine, that would never happen. But people are anti-cohabitation because they don't understand how good it can be if it's done properly. So if you want to learn about that, watch this video and it'll explain everything to you in a beautiful way that makes sense. Hope that helped.